I'm going to call Ian Lees-Galloway.
Very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, today is Workers' Memorial Day. It's the day where working people and business leaders and others come together across the country to mourn and commemorate those who have been lost at work, those people who went to work and never came back home again, as well as those who have been injured at work, and also to re-energise and reinvigorate the fight to ensure that the living get to work in safer workplaces. So last year, 47 people were killed at work. So far this year, 10 people have been killed whilst at work. And whilst I acknowledge that this government has taken health and safety more seriously in the wake of the Pike River disaster, and that there is health and safety reform legislation going through the House right now, we have to maintain a laser-like focus on accountability for health and safety and encouraging workers to participate in health and safety and to have their voices heard in the workplace. And it is also incumbent on all of us, sir, not just to rely on legislation, but to carry out safe working practices and to encourage better health and safety practices so that we will see fewer people killed and injured in our workplaces. So we have a workforce in New Zealand of around 2,375,000 people. And the Ministry for Business, Employment and Innovation is responsible now for the Labour Inspectorate that is responsible for ensuring that that workforce gets access to the minimum standards and requirements that it is entitled to under legislation. So the International Labour Organisation has a guideline for how many labour inspectors we should have. As a developed industrialised nation, the International Labour Organisation recommends that we have one labour inspector for every 10,000 workers. With our current workforce, that would amount to 237 labour inspectors. At the time of the period that this review considers, we had just 35 labour inspectors. I acknowledge that it has now increased to 41. That is less than 1/5. Less than 20% the number of labour inspectors that the International Labour Organisation recommends that we have. Now, sir, even the Council of Trade Unions in New Zealand has not recommended that we seek to hit that mark of 1 to 10,000. It recommended 2 years ago that we double the number at the time of 35 to 70, and that we double again so that by now the number of labour inspectors we would have would be around 140. That would be one labour inspector for every 1,600 workers. This government has not made any effort at all to get anywhere near that number. And so, sir, what we see is every day in our workplaces across New Zealand, minimum standards, rules around minimum wage, the expectation that workers have a written employment agreement, rules around the fact that you're not supposed to dock a worker's pay if theft occurs, such as people driving away from petrol stations. Those sorts of things happen every day because we do not have a ministry or a labour inspectorate that is sufficiently resourced to enforce the legislation that is in place. So whilst I'm happy that MB is working on issues to do with zero-hour contracts and that the Minister has indicated he plans to change the law to somehow deal with the issue of people having their pay docked when theft occurs, although it's illegal now, I don't know why the law needs to be changed. All those law changes are welcome, as are greater penalties for employers who breach those minimum standards. But my question to the government is, how is it that they actually plan to enforce those law changes when they can't even enforce the laws that are in place today? Because they refuse to resource our Labour Inspectorate and the ministry responsible for them to a sufficient enough extent so that workers can get the minimum rights that they are entitled to. So I was talking to a worker just the other day who has no written employment agreement and gets paid for probably 4 out of the 5 days a week that they work. Yet they're scared to take that to the Labour Inspectorate because they're fearful that they'll lose their job, and they can't have that happen in this job market soon.
I call Chris Fisher.